The Mafia boss's baby wouldn't stop crying on the plane until a single mother did the unthinkable. The infant's screams pierced through the first-class cabin like shattered glass, relentless and desperate. Every passenger within earshot winced, shifted uncomfortably, or shot irritated glances toward the source of the disturbance. But none dared to complain. Not when they saw the man holding the child. Vincent Romano sat rigidly in his seat, his jaw clenched so tight it could crack diamonds. The custom-tailored black suit that normally made him look like a dark angel now seemed to constrict around him like a prison. His normally cold, calculating eyes held a flicker of something foreign. Raw, unfiltered panic. The baby, his son, continued to wail, tiny fists flailing against Vincent's chest. 2 months old, and already bearing the weight of a crown he didn't ask for. 2 months since Lucia had taken her last breath, bringing this child into the world. 2 months since Vincent Romano, the most feared man in the American underground, had become something he never thought possible. Helpless, one of his bodyguards leaned in carefully, speaking low enough that other passengers couldn't hear. "We could land early. Find a no." Vincent's voice was still wrapped in silk. "We stay on schedule." But the baby didn't care about schedules. He didn't care that his father controlled half the East Coast's criminal operations. That men crossed streets to avoid his shadow. That entire families had disappeared at his word. The infant only knew hunger, discomfort, and the absence of the warmth he'd known for 2 precious months before it was stolen away. Vincent had tried everything. Bottles prepared by the nanny who waited at their destination. Pacifiers that the child spat out with surprising force. Rocking motions that felt awkward in his arms that were more accustomed to signing death warrants than soothing cries. Nothing worked. 3 rows ahead, Emily Carter heard the desperate cries and felt her body respond instinctively. Her breasts ached with sympathetic letdown, milk threatening to soak through the nursing pads she still wore, despite the fact that she closed her eyes, forcing down the wave of grief that always came with that thought. 6 months. It had been 6 months since she'd held her own daughter. 6 months since the tiny heart had simply stopped beating in the night. No explanation, no warning. Sudden infant death syndrome, the doctors had said, as if putting a name to the nightmare made it hurt less. Emily had been heading home from a grief counseling conference in New York, trying to put her shattered life back together. She was a pediatric nurse, or at least she had been. After losing Grace, she couldn't bring herself to return to the NICU, couldn't watch other people's babies thrive while hers lay cold in the ground. The crying intensified, and Emily felt tears prick her own eyes. She knew that sound, the desperate, hungry wail of an infant who needed something primal, something only a mother could provide. Her hands trembled as she gripped the armrests. "Miss, are you all right?" The flight attendant paused beside her, concerned. Emily looked up, then back toward where the crying originated. "That baby. He sounds I'm a nurse. Maybe I can help." The attendant's expression shifted to something between relief and skepticism. "The passenger has been quite firm about not wanting assistance, but if you'd like to try, I suppose it couldn't hurt." Emily unbuckled her seat belt before she could second-guess herself, following the attendant down the aisle. With each step, her heart pounded harder. This was insane. She was still lactating. Her body hadn't gotten the memo that there was no longer a baby to feed. But she couldn't just offer to breastfeed a stranger's child, could she? Then she saw him. Vincent Romano sat like a king on a throne, even in distress. Black hair swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved from marble by an angry god. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened by precisely maintained stubble, and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He wore power like a second skin, and danger rolled off him in ways that made her survival instincts scream to turn around. But the baby in his arms looked so small, so helpless against that broad chest. The infant's face was red from crying, tiny features scrunched in misery. "Sir," the flight attendant began nervously. "This passenger is a nurse." She wondered if she might. Vincent's gaze snapped to Emily, and she felt the impact like a physical blow. Those eyes could strip flesh from bone, could make grown men confess sins they hadn't even committed. For a moment, Emily forgot how to breathe. "A nurse," he repeated, his voice low and rough like gravel wrapped in velvet. An accent lingered at the edges. Italian probably, though Americanized by years in the States. Pediatric, Emily heard herself say, though her voice sounded far away. I know that cry. He's hungry. I've tried the bottle. Frustration cracked through Vincent's controlled exterior. He won't take it. Emily's eyes moved from the man to the baby, and something in her chest cracked open. The infant's cries had taken on a desperate edge, the kind that spoke of real distress. She'd heard it too many times in the NICU, and her body responded before her brain could catch up. Some babies won't take artificial nipples, she said softly, stepping closer despite every instinct telling her to run from this dangerous man. Especially if they were breastfed initially. Was his mother? Something shifted in Vincent's expression. A flash of such raw pain that Emily caught her breath. She died, he said flatly. 8 weeks ago, giving birth to him. The cabin seemed to go silent around them, though the baby still cried. Emily's eyes burned with unshed tears. Her grief recognizing his even as her nurse's training kicked in. Then he's probably refusing the bottle because he's looking for something familiar, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Something he associates with comfort and safety. Their eyes locked, and Emily saw the exact moment he understood what she was implying. His jaw tightened, and for a second she thought he might order her away. But then the baby let out another desperate wail, and something in the untouchable Mafia boss crumbled. Are you offering what I think you're offering? His voice was dangerous testing, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. Emily swallowed hard. This was beyond insane. But the baby was suffering, and her body was producing milk that had nowhere to go. And maybe, just maybe, she could help this tiny life even though she'd failed to save her own. I'm still producing, she admitted, her cheeks flushing. I lost my daughter 6 months ago. My body hasn't. I haven't been able to stop it. If you'd allow me, I could try. The silence that followed was deafening. Every passenger in first class had gone quiet, sensing they were witnessing something profound, even if they couldn't quite understand what. Vincent Romano stared at this woman, this stranger who had just offered the most intimate gift one human could give another, and felt the ground shift beneath him. In his world, there were no gifts. Everything had a price. Every kindness hit a blade. But this woman's eyes held only compassion and a grief that mirrored his own. The restroom, he said abruptly, standing with fluid grace despite the child in his arms. It's more private. Emily's heart hammered as she followed him toward the first-class lavatory, acutely aware of the bodyguard who fell into step behind them. This was real. This was actually happening. The bathroom was small but luxurious, as an airplane bathroom could be. Vincent stood in the doorway, his large frame taking up most of the space, hesitation written across features that probably hadn't shown uncertainty in years. I'll wait outside, he said finally, his voice rough. Unless you need, I'll be fine, Emily assured him, though her hands shook as she reached for the baby. What's his name? The word came out like a prayer and a curse. After my grandfather. Emily took the infant carefully, cradling his small body against her chest. Gabriel's cries had diminished to hiccuping whimpers, as if he sensed something was about to change. She looked up at Vincent, at this dangerous, powerful man who had just entrusted her with his most precious possession, and saw vulnerability that took her breath away. I'll take care of him, she promised. Vincent nodded once, sharp and controlled, then stepped back to let her close the door. The moment it clicked shut, Emily felt the weight of what she was about to do settle over her like a blanket. Her hands moved on autopilot, unbuttoning her blouse with the efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. The nursing bra came next, and then she was positioning Gabriel at her breast, supporting his tiny head the way she'd supported so many infants in the NICU. For a moment, nothing happened. Gabriel whimpered, turning his face against her skin, searching. Then his instincts kicked in, and he latched on, and Emily felt the familiar pull and release as he began to nurse. Tears streamed down her face, silently, as she looked down at the baby in her arms. He wasn't Grace. He would never be Grace. But he was a child who needed comfort, who needed nourishment, who needed the one thing her body was still desperate to provide. It's okay, little one, she whispered, stroking his dark hair. It's okay. Outside the door, Vincent Romano stood with his fists clenched at his sides, his bodyguard wisely maintaining distance. The silence that had replaced his son's cries was both a relief and a torment. He'd just handed Gabriel to a complete stranger. He who trusted no one, who verified the background of every person who came within 10 feet of his child, had just given his son to a woman whose last name he didn't even know. But something about her had reached through the armor he'd built around himself. Maybe it was the grief in her eyes that matched his own. Maybe it was the desperate courage it took to offer such an intimate kindness to a stranger. Or maybe it was simply that for the first time in 8 weeks, someone had offered to help without wanting something in return. When the bathroom door opened 15 minutes later, Emily emerged with Gabriel sleeping peacefully in her arms. The infant's face was relaxed, his tiny fist curled against her chest, completely at peace. Vincent looked at his son, truly peaceful for the first time since Lucia's death, and felt something shift in his chest. Something dangerous. Something that in his world could get people killed. "He's asleep," Emily said unnecessarily, her voice soft to avoid waking the baby. "He ate well. He'll probably sleep for a few hours now." She moved to hand Gabriel back, but Vincent's hand shot out to stop her, his fingers wrapping around her wrist with surprising gentleness. "Your name?" he demanded, though his tone had lost its edge. "Mitchell. Vincent Romano." He released her wrist, taking Gabriel from her arms with practiced care. His son barely stirred, too content to wake. "I owe you a debt, Emily Carter." "You don't owe me anything." Emily began buttoning her blouse, suddenly aware of how intimate this situation was. "I was happy to help. In my world, everything comes with a price." Vincent's eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "And what you just did, feeding my son, giving him peace when nothing else could, that's not something I can simply walk away from." Something in his tone made Emily's heart race with more than attraction. It sounded almost like a warning. "I should get back to my seat." The word was command, not request. Vincent shifted Gabriel to one arm with the ease of someone who'd been doing this alone for weeks, then pulled a business card from his suit pocket. "Call me when we land. I want to properly thank you." Emily took the card reflexively, her fingers brushing his. The contact sent electricity up her arm, and from the slight widening of his eyes, he'd felt it, too. "That's not necessary." "It is to me." His voice had gone soft. "Dangerous. You gave my son something precious. The least I can do is buy you dinner." Emily knew she should say no. Everything about this man screamed danger, from the way other passengers averted their eyes when he passed to the bodyguards who shadowed his movements. But there was something in his expression when he looked at his son, a vulnerability that called to her own broken heart. "Dinner." She found herself agreeing. "Just dinner." A ghost of a smile touched Vincent's lips, transforming his face from dangerous to devastatingly handsome. "Just dinner," he echoed, though something in his tone suggested he was making a promise neither of them understood yet. Emily returned to her seat in a daze. The warmth of Gabriel's small body still imprinted on her skin. She didn't notice the way Vincent's bodyguards were already pulling up information on her. Didn't see the calculating look in Vincent's eyes as he watched her walk away. In his world, in the world of the American Mafia, where tradition ran deeper than blood, what had just happened wasn't simple. It wasn't just a kind stranger helping a child in need. In the old ways, the ways his grandfather had taught him, the ways that still governed the ancient families, a woman who nursed a Dawn's child became bound to that family, became bound to him. Emily Carter had just fed his son. She'd given Gabriel the one thing Vincent couldn't provide, the one thing he'd been desperate for since Lucia's death. In doing so, she'd fulfilled a role that, in the traditions of their world, made her something sacred, made her his. Vincent looked down at his peacefully sleeping son and felt the ghost of his grandfather's words echo through his mind. When a woman feeds your child from her own body, she becomes the child's mother. And a Dawn's child can have only one mother, his queen. He hadn't believed in the old ways, not really. They were superstitions, traditions from a different era. But holding Gabriel truly at peace for the first time since birth, Vincent felt the weight of those ancient rules settling over him like a mantle. Emily Carter didn't know it yet, but the moment she'd offered to feed his son, she'd stepped into his world. And in his world, some things were sacred. Some bonds couldn't be broken. Some debts could only be paid one way. The plane continued its journey through the clouds, carrying two broken souls toward a destiny neither had seen coming. Emily Carter, the pediatric nurse running from her grief, and Vincent Romano, the mafia boss who'd just found something more precious than power, someone who could give his son the love of a mother. But love in his world came with a price. And that price was written in tradition older than America itself. Emily had saved his son's life tonight. Even if she didn't realize it, Gabriel had been slowly starving, refusing every bottle, growing weaker each day. The doctors had talked about feeding tubes, about hospitalization. But one act of compassion from a stranger had solved what weeks of medical intervention couldn't. And Vincent Romano always paid his debts. Always. The black SUV that picked up Emily from the airport 2 days later was not what she'd expected. She'd imagined a normal restaurant, maybe something upscale given Vincent's obvious wealth. Instead, the driver, a mountain of a man with cold eyes and an earpiece, had escorted her into a vehicle that screamed federal protection or something darker. The windows were tinted so dark she couldn't see out, and the locks engaged with an ominous click the moment her door closed. "Where are we going?" Emily tried to keep her voice steady as the SUV pulled into traffic. "The Dawn's estate, miss." The driver's eyes met hers in the rear-view mirror. "He thought you'd be more comfortable with a private dinner." Given the baby, the Dawn, not Vincent, not Mr. Romano, the Dawn. Emily's stomach twisted as pieces began clicking into place. The bodyguards on the plane, the way passengers had given him a wide berth, the ease with which he commanded others, the casual use of the title Dawn, a title she knew from crime dramas and news reports about organized crime. Oh God, what had she gotten herself into? The SUV wound through the streets of Newark before heading into the suburbs, each mile taking them farther from public spaces and closer to sprawling estates hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. When they finally turned through a particular gate, this one guarded by 2 men with very obvious weapons, Emily felt her heart climb into her throat. The estate was massive, a sprawling mansion that looked like something out of The Godfather. Manicured lawns stretched in every direction, and Emily counted at least 4 other security personnel patrolling the grounds before the SUV pulled up to the main entrance. "Miss Carter." A woman in her 60s appeared at the door, her severe expression softening slightly as she looked Emily over. "I'm Rosa, the house manager. Romano is waiting in the nursery. If you'll follow me." Nursery, right? Because this was about Gabriel. Emily clung to that thought as Rosa led her through a home that belonged in Architectural Digest. Marble floors, priceless artwork, furniture that cost more than Emily's yearly salary. Everything screamed wealth and power and danger. They climbed a grand staircase to the 2nd floor, and Emily heard it before she saw it. Gabriel's cries, not as desperate as on the plane, but still distressed. Rosa opened a door to reveal a nursery that was both opulent and surprisingly warm, decorated in soft blues and silvers with a mural of clouds covering one wall. Vincent stood by the window, Gabriel wailing in his arms, his expression tight with frustration. He'd shed the suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle, and Emily's breath caught. Extensive tattoos that disappeared beneath the fabric. Not regular tattoos. These were deliberate, symbolic. She recognized a few of the images. A crown, what looked like family crests, the kind of ink that told stories in the criminal underworld. His voice was rough with relief as he turned. "Thank God. He's been asking for you. Asking for me." Emily's voice came out higher than intended. "Vincent, what is this? Who are you really?" Something flickered in his dark eyes. Respect maybe that she was asking directly. He gestured to Rosa, who slipped out silently, closing the door behind her. Suddenly, Emily was alone with the most dangerous-looking man she'd ever met and his crying infant. "I think you already know," Vincent said quietly, still rocking Gabriel. "You're smart. You've put the pieces together. You're with the Mafia." It wasn't a question. "I am the Mafia. At least I'm the head of the Romano family. We control most of the operations from here to Boston. Shipping, construction, waste management. Some legitimate, some." He paused. "Less legitimate." Emily backed toward the door, her hand fumbling for the handle. "I need to leave. Gabriel needs you." Vincent's voice stopped her, not because it was commanding, but because it was broken. "Look at him, Emily. Really look." Against her better judgment, Emily did. The baby in Vincent's arms was thinner than he'd been on the plane. His cries had a weak quality to them that made her nurse's instincts scream alarm. Dark circles shadowed his tiny eyes, and his skin had lost the healthy flush infants should have. What happened? She was moving forward before she could stop herself. He looked fine 2 days ago. He won't eat. Vincent's jaw clenched. Not the bottle, not anything. He took one bottle the night we landed, and since then, he's refused everything. The pediatrician wants to hospitalize him. Put in a feeding tube. But his voice cracked. I can't do that to him. He's already lost his mother. If I could give him what he needs, I would. But you can't. Emily finished, understanding flooding through her. She reached for Gabriel, and the moment the baby was in her arms, his cries diminished to whimpers. He turned his face against her chest, rooting instinctively. Oh, sweetheart, you're so hungry, aren't you? I'm sorry. Vincent ran a hand through his hair, the gesture making him look younger, more vulnerable. I know this isn't fair to you. I know I have no right to ask, but when I saw how he responded to you on the plane, how peaceful he was. Emily, I haven't seen my son peaceful since the day he was born. Not once. Emily looked from the baby in her arms to the man before her. This terrifying, powerful, dangerous man who was also a desperate father trying to save his child. She thought of Grace, of how she would have moved heaven and earth to keep her daughter alive, how she'd have begged, borrowed, or stolen anything that could have prevented that terrible morning. This is insane, she whispered. I know you're a criminal. Yes, I should run out that door and never look back. Probably, but he needs to eat. Emily looked down at Gabriel, whose whimpers had turned to hiccuping sobs as he continued to search for sustenance. And I can help him. I'll pay you. Vincent spoke quickly, urgently. Whatever you want, a salary, a house, anything. Just help him. Please. They did it. This man, who clearly wasn't used to asking for anything, who probably ruled his world with absolute authority, was begging her to save his son. Can you give us privacy? Emily asked quietly. Vincent nodded and moved toward the door, but Emily's voice stopped him. Wait, I need to know something first. She met his eyes directly, refusing to look away, despite how intimidating he was. On the plane, you said I'd stepped into your world, that what I did created some kind of debt. What did you mean? A muscle in Vincent's jaw ticked. For a long moment, he didn't answer, and Emily thought he might not. Then he sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of tradition. My grandfather was born in Sicily. He began, his accent thickening slightly as he spoke of his heritage. He brought the old ways with him when he came to America, built this family on those traditions. One of those traditions is about children, specifically about who feeds them. I don't understand. In the old families, blood isn't the only thing that makes family. Milk does, too. Vincent's eyes were intense, burning with something Emily couldn't name. When a woman nurses a child that isn't biologically hers, especially the child of Adon, she becomes bound to that family, becomes sacred to them. In the oldest traditions, she becomes what? Emily's heart was pounding. The child's mother, Vincent finished. And in our world, Adon's child can have only one mother, his wife. Emily stared at him, trying to process what he'd just said, trying to understand if he was saying what she thought he was saying. You can't be serious. I don't expect you to marry me, Vincent said quickly. This isn't medieval Sicily, but in my world, what you did on that plane, it means something. It means you're under my family's protection now, whether you want it or not. It means other families will see you as connected to us. And it means, he stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. It means I can't let you walk away. Can't let me. Emily's voice rose. You don't own me. I'm not some possession you can claim because of an old superstition. It's not a superstition to the people I deal with. Vincent's voice hardened. The moment word gets out that you nursed my son, and it will get out, Emily. Things like this don't stay secret in my world. You'll become a target. Rival families will see you as a way to get to me. You'll need protection. My protection. Then I won't do it again. Emily held Gabriel closer. Even as the baby's whimpers intensified. I'll help him today. Make sure he's eating properly. And then I'll leave. No one needs to know. Rosa already knows. My driver knows. My security team knows. Vincent stepped closer, and Emily fought the urge to back away. And in about 3 hours when my underboss comes for his weekly report, he'll know. By tomorrow, every family from here to Chicago will know that Vincent Romano's son has a wet nurse. That's how fast information travels in this world. Then tell them I'm just an employee, a hired nurse. It doesn't work like that. Frustration colored his tone. The symbolism matters. The act itself matters. You gave my son something precious, something intimate. In the eyes of the old families, that makes you precious. It makes you mine to protect. I'm not yours. But even as Emily said it, Gabriel let out a desperate cry, and she felt her body respond. Milk letting down despite her emotional state. The baby sensed it, too, rooting more frantically against her shirt. Vincent saw her cease, saw the understanding in her eyes that her body was betraying her resolve. He needs you, he said softly. And like it or not, you need me now, too. Because I promise you, Emily Carter, the moment other families find out about this, your life will never be the same. Emily looked down at the suffering infant in her arms, then back up at the dangerous man before her. Every rational part of her brain screamed to run, to get as far from this world as possible. But she was a nurse. She'd taken an oath to help those in need. And this baby, this innocent child who'd lost his mother the day he was born, needed her desperately. 1 week, she heard herself say. I'll stay 1 week. Help get him established on a bottle. Work with a lactation consultant to find a solution. But then I'm gone, and you tell everyone I was just a temporary medical solution. No weird mafia marriage traditions, no sacred bonds, just a professional arrangement. Vincent's expression was unreadable. 1 week, and I wanted in writing a contract that says I'm free to leave after 7 days with no retaliation, no following me, no claiming me as some kind of property. He pulled out his phone. I'll have my lawyer draw it up within the hour. Emily nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She turned away from him, settling into the plush rocking chair positioned near the window. Privacy, she repeated. This time, Vincent left without argument, pulling the door closed behind him. Emily heard him post someone outside. Of course he did. He probably had guards everywhere. But for now, she was alone with Gabriel. Okay, little one, she whispered, unbuttoning her shirt with shaking hands. Let's get you fed. Gabriel latched on immediately, his desperate suckling gradually easing into the rhythmic pull of a satisfied infant. Emily closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face as she rocked him. This was wrong on so many levels. She was feeding a crime lord's baby, sitting in a mansion bought with blood money, trapped by traditions older than America itself. But God, it felt right to have a baby in her arms again, to feel needed, to feel like maybe she could save this one, even though she'd failed to save Grace. Outside the door, Vincent leaned against the wall, listening to the silence that meant his son was finally eating. Finally at peace. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Carlo, I need you here now, and bring the lawyer. He paused, listening to his underboss's response because we have a situation. The baby has a wet nurse. He could practically hear Carlo's shock through the phone. In their world, everyone would know exactly what that meant. Yeah, Vincent continued, his voice grim. I know what the traditions say. That's why we need the lawyer. I need to figure out how to protect her without he stopped, not wanting to voice what the old ways would demand. What his grandfather would have insisted upon without question. When a woman nurses a Don's child, she becomes the Don's wife, not through ceremony or paperwork, but through an act older and more binding than any legal contract, through the sacred act of sustaining the family's heir. Vincent had told Emily he didn't expect her to marry him, and he'd meant it. He didn't believe in forcing women into anything. Traditions be damned. But he also knew that in the eyes of every old-school family from New York to Sicily, the moment Emily Carter had put Gabriel to her breast, she'd become the Romano family's queen, whether she wanted the crown or not. And that meant Vincent had to protect her, had to claim her publicly as under his protection before rival families decided to make their own moves. Had to make it clear that touching Emily Carter was tantamount to declaring war on the Romano family. He just had to figure out how to do that without making her hate him in the process. Inside the nursery, Emily held Gabriel as he nursed, completely unaware that she'd just become the most valuable and most dangerous woman in the American underworld. Unaware that Vincent Romano's rivals were already making plans, seeing opportunity in this unexpected development. Unaware that the man outside that door was already falling for her, drawn to her courage and compassion in ways that terrified him. Because in his world, love was a weakness. Love got people killed, but his son needed her. And increasingly, Vincent was realizing he needed her, too. 1 week, she'd said, 7 days to get Gabriel eating properly, and then she'd walk away. Vincent stared at the closed nursery door and made a decision that would change everything. He'd give her the week, let her think she could leave, let her feel safe enough to lower her guard. And in that time, he'd show her that despite the darkness of his world, despite the blood on his hands, he could be what she and Gabriel needed. Because 1 week wasn't going to be enough. Not nearly enough for any of them. For days into Emily's 1 week, the mansion had become a strange kind of home. She'd been given a bedroom suite adjacent to the nursery for convenience, Rosa had explained, though Emily suspected it was more about keeping her close and secure. The rooms were beautiful, decorated in soft creams and golds, with a bathroom that had a tub large enough to swim in. Everything screamed luxury and comfort and captivity. Emily spent most of her time in the nursery with Gabriel, feeding him every 3 hours, learning his rhythms, watching him slowly regain the healthy flush that babies should have. Vincent was there for almost every feeding, sitting in the corner chair like a silent guardian, watching his son nurse with an expression that twisted Emily's heart. He never pressured her, never crossed lines, but his presence was constant and increasingly magnetic. He's gaining weight, Emily said on the 4th evening. Gabriel's sleeping peacefully in her arms after his feeding. Another few days, and he'll be strong enough to try transitioning to expressed milk in bottles. But Vincent's tone didn't sound pleased. He looked tense, wound tight. His jaw locked in that way. She was starting to recognize meant he was holding something back. What's wrong? We need to talk. He stood, moving to close the nursery door more firmly. About the situation. Emily's stomach dropped. What situation? Word got out. He ran a hand through his hair, messing the perfectly styled black strands. About you. About what you're doing for Gabriel. 3 families have already reached out, making inquiries. Polite ways of asking if I've claimed you formally. His eyes met hers, dark and intense. If you're under my protection as just an employee or as something more. And what did you tell them? That you're mine. The words came out rough, possessive. That anyone who touches you answers to me. Emily should have been angry, should have railed against being called his. But something about the fierce protectiveness in his voice made her feel safe instead of trapped. So, I'm a prisoner here. You're protected here. Vincent moved closer, and Emily's pulse quickened. There's a difference. You can leave. I signed a contract, remember. But if you leave, I can't guarantee your safety. The Benedetti family has already made noises about wanting to meet the woman nursing the Romano heir. Why would they want to meet me? Because you're valuable. He stopped just short of touching her, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. In the old ways, the woman who nurses Adon's child holds almost as much power as the Don himself. She's sacred, protected, and he hesitated. And what? And if something happened to me, you and Gabriel would be the logical successors to control the family. The words fell like stones between them. That makes you dangerous to my rivals and valuable to my allies. Emily's arms tightened around the sleeping baby. This is insane. This is my world. Vincent's voice softened. I'm sorry you got pulled into it. But Emily, he paused, seeming to wrestle with something. I'm not sorry you're here. The confession hung in the air between them, charged and dangerous. Emily's breath caught as she watched emotions flicker across his usually controlled face. Vulnerability wants something that looked dangerously like affection. Vincent, let me finish. He cut her off gently. These past 4 days watching you with my son, seeing him peaceful and healthy because of you. Emily, you gave us both something I thought was lost forever. A chance at normal at family. I'm not your family. I'm just helping. You are family. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement so she could pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, his hand cooped her cheek with surprising gentleness. The moment you fed Gabriel, you became family. Maybe not in the legal sense, maybe not in the way the modern world understands, but in the ways that matter to me, to my son. You're already ours. Emily knew she should pull away, should remind him about their agreement, about the 3 days she had left before leaving. Should definitely not be leaning into his touch like a flower towards sunlight. This can't happen, she whispered, but her body betrayed her words, swaying closer to him. Why not? His thumb stroked her cheekbone, and Emily felt the calluses there. Evidence that this man wasn't just a suit-wearing executive, but someone who knew how to use his hands, how to fight, how to survive. Because you're dangerous. Because your world is violent and dark, and I've already lost. Her voice broke. I can't lose anyone else. I can't watch someone else die. Understanding flooded Vincent's expression. Emily flinched. How do you know about I had you investigated? He said it without apology. The moment you offered to feed Gabriel on that plane, I had my people pull everything about you. I know about your daughter, about the SIDS diagnosis, about the fact that you haven't worked since it happened, that you've been in grief counseling, that you're rebuilding a life that feels impossible to rebuild. Emily should have been furious about the invasion of privacy, should have slapped him and stormed out. But instead, she felt oddly relieved that he knew, that she didn't have to explain the gaping wound in her heart. Then you understand why this can't be more than a temporary arrangement, she said softly. Why I can't get attached to Gabriel, or does she stop unable to finish, or to me? Vincent's jaw clenched. Emily, I know loss. I watched Lucia die bringing our son into the world. Watched her bleed out while doctors tried everything to save her. I held her hand as the light left her eyes, knowing that I was losing my wife and my son was losing his mother before he'd even taken his first breath. Tears streamed down Emily's face. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Just don't write us off because you're scared. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. These past few days, I've watched you be so brave. Enough to feed a stranger's child. Brave enough to walk into a world you didn't understand. Brave enough to love my son, even knowing you'd have to leave him. Don't tell me you're too scared to try. Emily's voice was barely a whisper. And then he was kissing her. It was gentle at first, a soft press of lips that asked permission rather than demanding surrender. Emily froze for half a heartbeat. Gabriel still sleeping in her arms. Every rational thought screaming that this was wrong. But then Vincent's hand slid into her hair, and she melted into the kiss like she was coming home. He tasted like whiskey and danger, and something uniquely him that made her head spin. His other hand came up to cradle her face, holding her like she was precious, like she was sacred. The kiss deepened, and Emily felt 16 years of walls crumbling around her heart. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he whispered. Not for a week. I can't. You can. His voice was fierce now, desperate. I need you. And unless I'm completely misreading things, you need us, too. Emily looked down at the sleeping baby in her arms, then back up at the dangerous, beautiful man, offering her a life she'd never imagined. A life that terrified her. A life that somehow felt more real than anything she'd experienced in months. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I. Vincent kissed her forehead, soft and reverent. But I'm more scared of letting you walk away. Before Emily could respond, Gabriel stirred, letting out a small whimper. She automatically began rocking him, maternal instincts kicking in. Vincent watched them, and the expression on his face stole Emily's breath. Possessive and protective, and full of so much longing it hurt. Let me put him down, she said softly. Together, they moved to the crib, a massive thing of carved wood and soft linens that probably cost more than Emily's car. She laid Gabriel down gently, and Vincent immediately adjusted the blanket, checked the baby monitor, performed all the little rituals of a father who'd been doing this alone for 2 months. When he straightened, Emily was right there. And suddenly, the air between them was charged again. The nursery lights were dimmed. Gabriel's soft breathing the only sound. They were alone in this bubble of domesticity. And Emily felt the last of her resistance crumbling. I should go to my room, she said, but didn't move. You should, Vincent agreed, also not moving. We need boundaries. This is happening too fast. But when his hand found the small of her back, pulling her closer, Emily didn't resist. When he kissed her again, deeper this time, with the hunger of a man who'd been holding back for days, she kissed him back with equal fervor. They stumbled away from the crib, mindful of the sleeping baby, until Emily's back hit the wall, and Vincent was pressing against her, all hard muscle and controlled power. Tell me to stop, he murmured against her lips. I should, but will you? Emily looked up into his eyes, those dark, dangerous eyes that somehow made her feel safer than she had in months, and made a decision that would change everything. The word was barely out before his mouth was on hers again, and Emily forgot all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Forgot about his criminal empire, about the danger, about the fact that she'd known him less than a week. All she could feel was his warmth, his strength, the way he held her like she was something precious he'd been searching for his whole life. When they finally broke apart, both panting, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. 3 more days, he said. Your contract gives you 3 more days before you're free to leave. If you still want to leave after that, I won't stop you. I'll honor our agreement. His hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. But Emily, I'm going to spend those 3 days convincing you to stay. I'm going to show you that what we could have, what we could be, it's worth the risk. And if I still want to leave. Pain flickered across his features, but he nodded. Then I'll let you go. I'll make sure you're protected. Set up somewhere safe where the other families can't touch you, but I'll let you go. Emily searched his face, looking for lies, for manipulation, for any sign that this was a trap. But all she saw was honesty and a vulnerability that this powerful man probably showed to no one else. Okay, she whispered. 3 days. Something fierce and possessive flashed in Vincent's eyes. 3 days, he repeated. Then he kissed her once more, soft and reverent, before forcing himself to step back. Get some rest. Gabriel will be hungry in a few hours. Emily nodded, her lips still tingling from his kisses, and slipped out of the nursery. Her legs felt shaky as she walked the short distance to her room, her mind spinning with everything that had just happened. She'd kissed him. She'd agreed to let him try to convince her to stay. She was falling for a man who probably had more blood on his hands than she wanted to know about. But God help her. When she was in his arms, none of that seemed to matter. Emily locked her bedroom door and leaned against it, one hand pressed to her racing heart. In 3 days, she'd either be walking away from the first man who'd made her feel alive since losing Grace, or she'd be stepping fully into a world that terrified her. She didn't know which option scared her more. Down the hall, Vincent stood in the nursery, watching his son sleep peacefully. For the first time since Lucia's death, he felt something other than guilt and grief. He felt hope. He felt the stirrings of something that might be happiness. Emily Carter had walked into their lives like an angel, offering salvation when he'd been drowning. And now, he had 3 days to make her understand that this thing between them wasn't just about Gabriel needing a mother or about ancient traditions binding them together. It was about the fact that when he looked at her, he didn't see the broken nurse running from her grief. He saw his future. He saw the woman who could stand beside him, who could be strong enough to survive in his world, who could love his son as fiercely as he did. He saw his queen. The problem was Emily didn't see herself that way. Not yet. She still saw herself as the woman who'd failed to save her daughter, as someone too broken to take on something as big as loving them. Vincent pulled out his phone and sent a text to Carlo. Cancel all meetings for the next 3 days. I'm not to be disturbed unless the city is burning. 3 days to convince Emily Carter that despite the darkness, despite the danger, despite every rational reason she had to run, she belonged here with them in this strange fractured family that was somehow becoming whole again. 3 days to make her fall in love with them. Vincent Romano had built an empire through force of will and ruthless determination. Surely he could win one woman's heart in 3 days. As Gabriel let out a soft sigh in his sleep, Vincent made a silent vow. He would give Emily every reason to stay and no reason to leave. He would show her the man beneath the title, the father beneath the dawn, the heart beneath the armor. And if she still chose to leave after that, then he'd have to let her go, even if it destroyed him. But first, he'd fight like hell to make her want to stay. The game was on, and Vincent Romano never lost. Not when it mattered this much. Emily woke to chaos. The explosion shattered the pre-dawn silence, rattling windows throughout the mansion. She bolted upright, heart hammering, and her first thought was, Gabriel. She ran barefoot across the hall into the nursery, finding Vincent already there, his son clutched protectively against his chest. What's happening? Emily's voice trembled. They made their move. Vincent's face was carved from stone. All vulnerability from their kiss the night before, replaced by the cold dawn she'd glimpsed on the plane. The Benedettis. They just bombed my warehouse on the docks. Before Emily could respond, Carlo burst through the door, blood streaking his temple. Boss, it's a distraction. They hit 3 locations simultaneously, and they left a message. He glanced at Emily, hesitation clear. Say it, Vincent commanded. They want the woman. They said if you don't hand over the Romanos' wet nurse by midnight, they'll level every property you own. The room spun around Emily. This was her fault. Her presence had painted a target on this family. Give me to them. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. If it stops the war, no? Vincent's voice was absolute, brooking no argument. He handed Gabriel to Rosa, who had appeared silently in the doorway. Take him to the safe room now. Then he was in front of Emily, his hands gripping her shoulders with barely controlled intensity. Listen to me very carefully. You are under my protection. That means I would burn this entire city to the ground before I let anyone take you. Do you understand? Emily saw it then. The monster everyone feared. His eyes had gone black and cold, his whole body radiating lethal intent, but his hands on her shoulders remained gentle, even as fury rolled off him in waves. They'll kill you, she whispered. They'll try. A dangerous smile curved his lips. They'll fail, but Emily, his expression softened fractionally. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? She should say. No, should demand he let her leave. And this before more people died. But looking into his eyes, seeing the fierce protectiveness there, she found herself nodding. He pulled her close, pressing a hard kiss to her forehead. Carlo will take you to the safe room with Gabriel. Stay there until I come for you. Don't open the door for anyone else. Vincent, I'll come back. He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. I promise you, Emily Carter, I will come back. We have 3 days left. Remember, I'm not done convincing you to stay. Then he was gone, barking orders into his phone as he strode from the nursery. Emily stood frozen until Carlo touched her arm gently. Miss Carter, we need to move. The safe room was deep in the mansion's basement, accessed through a hidden door in the wine cellar. It was surprisingly comfortable. A full apartment with bedrooms, kitchen, and enough supplies to last weeks. Rosa was already there with Gabriel, the baby miraculously still sleeping through the chaos. How long will we be here? Emily asked as Carlos secured the heavy door. However long it takes, Rosa's face was grim. The dawn won't rest until every threat is eliminated. Hours crawled by. Emily fed Gabriel when he woke, her body going through the familiar motions while her mind screamed with worry. What was happening up there? Was Vincent safe? How many people were dying because of her? When Gabriel finally went back to sleep in the portable crib, Emily found herself pacing like a caged animal. Rosa watched her with knowing eyes. You love him, the older woman said quietly. It wasn't a question. I barely know him. That doesn't answer my question. Emily stopped pacing, her shoulders slumping. How can I love someone whose world is so violent? Someone who probably has blood on his hands. My husband worked for the Don's father, Rosa said. 30 years in this life. It took him in the end. A rival's bullet meant for the old Don. But those 30 years, they were full of love, loyalty, and family. Yes, there was darkness. There's always darkness in this world. But there was light, too. Does the light make up for the darkness? That's for you to decide, Miss Carter. Rosa stood, moving toward the small kitchen. But I'll tell you this. I've worked for the Romano family for 40 years. I've seen 3 Dons, and I've never seen one look at a woman the way Vincent looks at you, like you're his salvation. Emily was still processing those words when the lights flickered. Once, twice, then the backup generator kicked in, bathing everything in emergency lighting. What does that mean? Emily's voice rose with panic. Rosa's face had gone pale. It means someone cut the main power. It means they're here. The sound of gunfire erupted from somewhere above them, muffled but unmistakable. Emily ran to Gabriel's crib, scooping him up protectively. The baby woke with a startled cry, sensing the tension. Then the lights went out completely. In the darkness, Emily heard Rosa move closer, heard the distinctive sound of a gun being cocked. Stay behind me, the older woman commanded. All grandmotherly warmth replaced by cold efficiency. More gunfire. Shouting, the sounds of combat filtering down through the reinforced walls. Emily clutched Gabriel tighter, tears streaming down her face as she whispered nonsense reassurances to the crying infant. This was her fault. All of it. If she just walked away on that plane, the door to the safe room shook with impact. Once, twice. Someone was trying to break through. Rosa, Emily's voice cracked. They can't get through that door, Rosa assured her. But Emily heard the uncertainty beneath the confidence. It's reinforced steel. It would take an explosion rock the room. Smaller than the warehouse blast, but devastating in the confined space. Emily's ears rang as smoke poured through a crack that had appeared in the supposedly impenetrable door. Rosa shoved Emily toward the back of the safe room. There's an emergency exit behind the bookshelf. Take Gabriel and run. What about you? I'll slow them down. Rosa raised her gun, her expression resolute. Go, Miss Carter. The Don is counting on you to keep his son safe. Emily ran, Gabriel screaming in her arms, fumbling for the hidden latch Rosa had shown her during the safety briefing. The bookshelf swung open, revealing a narrow tunnel barely lit by battery-powered emergency lights. Behind her, she heard the safe room door finally give way. Heard Rosa's gunfire once, twice, 3 times. Heard a man's voice shout in Italian. Then she was in the tunnel, running blindly through the darkness with Gabriel clutched to her chest, not knowing if she was running towards safety or into the arms of the enemy. Not knowing if Vincent was alive or dead. Not knowing if she'd ever get the chance to tell him that yes, God help her, she did love him. The tunnel seemed endless. But finally, Emily saw light ahead. She burst out into the night air, finding herself in the woods behind the estate. In the distance, she could see flames rising from the mansion, could hear the sounds of combat. And then she heard something else. A car engine getting closer. Emily turned to run deeper into the woods, but it was too late. The SUV screeched to a stop, and men poured out. Not Vincent's men. She knew that instantly from the way they moved, from the predatory smiles on their faces. One of them stepped forward, older with cold eyes and a smile that made Emily's blood freeze. The famous wet nurse, he said in heavily accented English. Finally, take her. Emily fought, screaming Gabriel's name as hands grabbed her, but it was useless. They were professionals, and she was just a terrified nurse trying to protect a baby. The last thing she saw before they forced a cloth over her mouth was the mansion burning in the distance, smoke rising like a funeral pea into the dawn sky. Then darkness claimed her, and Emily Carter disappeared into the night with the Romano heir in her arms, wondering if the man she'd fallen for would even survive long enough to search for her. Emily woke in a room that reeked of old money and older sins. Her head pounded from whatever they'd used to knock her out, but her first thought was Gabriel. She bolted upright to find the baby sleeping peacefully in an antique bassinet beside the ornate bed where she'd been placed. Relief flooded through her. They hadn't heard him. Awake finally, the voice came from the shadows. The older man from the woods stepped into the light. I am Salvatore Benedetti, and you, my dear, are worth your weight in gold. Where are we? Emily's voice was Horo. My estate about 50 miles from the Romano mansion, or what's left of it. His smile was cruel. Don't worry. Your beloved Don is alive for now. I made sure word reached him about where to find you. Want him to come. Understanding dawned with horror. Of course. Vincent Romano destroyed my family 10 years ago. Killed my sons. Took my territory. Left me with nothing but scraps. And now he gestured to Gabriel. Now he cares about something. Finally, after a decade of being untouchable, he has a weakness. 2 weaknesses, actually. He moved closer, and Emily pressed herself back against the headboard. You and his precious heir. The sacred wet nurse, and the son who bears the Romano name. Tell me, does he love you? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play stupid. Salvatore's hand shot out, gripping her chin painfully. I've seen the reports. The way he looks at you, the way he's protected you. Vincent Romano hasn't cared about anything since his wife died. But he cares about you. And that is going to destroy him. He released her, smoothing his suit. He'll come for you tonight. I've made sure of it. And when he does, when he walks through those doors willing to trade everything for your safety, I'll take it all. His empire, his power, his life, everything. He'll kill you, Emily said, trying to sound brave, perhaps. But first, he'll have to watch me hurt what he loves. And that will be worth dying for. The hours that followed were torture. Emily stayed close to Gabriel, feeding him when he cried, changing him with supplies Salvatore's people had thoughtfully provided. They wanted the baby healthy, wanted him as leverage when Vincent arrived. As dusk fell, Salvatore returned. He's here earlier than expected, actually. Your Don must be quite motivated. He hauled Emily to her feet. Come, you'll want to see this. He dragged her to a large study. Gabriel clutched in her arms and positioned her near the window where she could see the grounds below. Her heart stopped. Vincent stood alone in the center of the courtyard, illuminated by floodlights. No bodyguards, no weapons visible, his hands raised in surrender. But even from this distance, Emily could see the coiled violence in his stance, the barely leashed fury in his posture. Benedetti, his voice carried clearly through the open window. I'm here. Let them go. Salvatore laughed, pushing Emily closer to the window so Vincent could see her. The moment their eyes met across the distance, Emily saw Vincent's mask crack. Raw emotion flooded his face. Relief, fear, love. Your empire for the woman and child, Salvatore called down. Sign over everything. Territory, businesses, operations, all of it. Make me Dawn of the Romano family, and I'll let them live. Vincent didn't hesitate. I'll sign whatever you want. Just don't hurt them. Emily's eyes widened with shock. He was giving up everything. His entire world, his power, his legacy for her and Gabriel. Touching. Salvatore sneered. But I think we both know I can't let you live, Romano. You just rebuild. Come after me. No, you have to die. But first, you'll watch me take everything. He pulled a gun, pressing it to Emily's temple. Starting with her, everything happened in slow motion. Emily saw Vincent move impossibly fast for someone who was supposed to be unarmed. His hand went to his ankle, came up with a weapon. At the same moment, Emily did the only thing she could think of. She bit down hard on Salvatore's wrist, making him jerk the gun away from her head. The shot went wide. Glass shattered, and then the world exploded into chaos. Doors burst open and Vincent's men poured in. They'd been there all along, hidden, waiting. But Vincent himself was already inside, moving like death incarnate. Emily had never seen anything so terrifying or so beautiful. Salvatore grabbed for her again, but Emily was done being a victim. She swung Gabriel's bassinet at his knee. Thankfully, the baby was still in her arms, and the old man stumbled. It was all the opening Vincent needed. You touched what's mine. Vincent snarled, and his fist connected with Salvatore's jaw with a crack that echoed through the room. The fight was brutal, but brief. Salvatore was old, past his prime. Vincent was in his prime and fueled by fury. When it was over, Salvatore was on his knees, bleeding, defeated. Kill me, he spat. End it. Vincent leveled his gun at the old man's head. Emily saw his finger tighten on the trigger, saw the cold calculation in his eyes. This was the monster, the killer, the Don who'd built his empire on violence. Vincent. Emily's voice cut through the haze. He looked at her, and Emily saw him wearing with himself. Saw the darkness battling with the man she'd come to know. He tried to kill you. Vincent growled. He put his hands on you. On my son. I know. Emily walked closer. Gabriel sleeping miraculously in her arms. But if you kill him like this in cold blood while I watch, you'll lose yourself. And I need you. Not the Dawn, not the monster. We need the man. The silence stretched. Then Vincent lowered his gun. Take him, he ordered his men. Turn him over to the families. Let them decide his fate for breaking the old laws by targeting a sacred woman. As Salvatore was dragged away, screaming threats, Vincent turned to Emily. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then he crossed the distance in 2 strides, pulling her and Gabriel into his arms. I thought I'd lost you, he whispered into her hair. When I saw the safe room breached, when I couldn't find you, Emily, I thought I'd lost you both. You found us. Emily pulled back enough to look at his face. You gave up everything to save us. I'd give up everything 1,000 times over. He cupped her face with shaking hands. None of it matters without you. The empire, the power, the name, it all means nothing if you're not here. The families won't accept that, Emily said. You can't just walk away from being a Dawn. Watch me. His eyes blazed with determination. I'm done with this life, Emily. I'm done with violence and death and living in darkness. You made me want something more. Made me remember there's light in the world. But the Romano family has a successor waiting. Vincent's smile was grim. My cousin Gabriel. Yes, I named my son after him. Has been angling for the position for years. He can have it. I'm taking my son and the woman I love, and I'm walking away. The woman you love. Emily's heart hammered. Did you think I'd give up my empire for just anyone? He kissed her softly. I love you, Emily Carter. I loved you when you offered to feed my son. Loved you when you stood in my world and refused to break. Love you now, standing here covered in glass and dust, still protecting my child. Tears streamed down Emily's face. This is crazy. Probably. I've known you a week. Best week of my life. Your world almost got us killed. I'm leaving that world for you. For Gabriel. He kissed her again deeper. Say you'll stay not for 3 days, forever. Be my wife, Emily. Not because of traditions or sacred bonds, but because I love you and I hope you might love me, too. Emily looked at this beautiful, dangerous, impossible man. Thought about her week in his world. Thought about how alive she'd felt in his arms. Thought about Gabriel sleeping peacefully against her chest. This child who'd healed something broken in her heart. I do love you, she whispered. God help me. Then say yes. 6 months later, Emily stood in a small church in Montana, wearing a simple white dress with Gabriel, now chubby and healthy, babbling happily in Rosa's arms in the front pew. Nervous? Vincent asked, looking devastating in a dark suit, his hand warm in hers. Terrified, Emily admitted, but in a good way. The wedding was small. Just Rosa, Carlo, and a handful of others who'd followed Vincent into his new life. Emily's parents were there, too, cautiously accepting of their daughter's whirlwind romance with the reformed businessman who'd swept her off her feet. They didn't know the whole truth. Didn't need to. That part of Vincent's life was over. The vows were simple. No mention of Dawn or empires or sacred traditions. Just two people promising to love each other through whatever came next. When Vincent kissed her, Emily felt complete for the first time since losing Grace. This was her family now. Her impossible, beautiful, miraculous family. The reception was held at their new home, a ranch house on 50 acres of Montana wilderness, far from New York and the life Vincent had left behind. As they danced under string lights, Gabriel sleeping peacefully inside, Emily marveled at how much had changed. Any regrets? She asked against Vincent's chest. Not one. He pulled back to look at her. Though I should warn you, Carlo got a concerning call today. The family's found us. Vincent's jaw tightened. Nothing threatening. Just checking in, making sure we're really out. And are we? He kissed her forehead. I made my position clear. I'm done. The Romano family belongs to Gabriel now. My cousin Gabriel, I mean. And if anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with the Council of Families, who by the way officially sanctioned my retirement. Because of me, Emily understood. Because I'm sacred to them. Because you saved the Romano heir when no one else could. Because you prove that love is stronger than power. Vincent smiled. The old families respect that. They won't touch us. As if on cue, headlights appeared at the end of their long driveway. Emily tensed, but Vincent squeezed her hand reassuringly. A single car pulled up and a man in his 60s stepped out, well-dressed, carrying himself with authority. Don Ricci. Vincent greeted him with careful respect. This is unexpected. Relax, Romano. The older man smiled warmly. I come as a friend, not a threat. The families wanted someone to deliver this officially. He handed Vincent an envelope sealed with wax. Your retirement papers signed by all 5 families. You're free. Truly free. Vincent opened it. Emily reading over his shoulder. It was a formal document releasing Vincent from all obligations to the Romano family and the wider organization. Thank you, Vincent said quietly. Don't thank me. Thank your wife. Don Ricci nodded to Emily. What she did for your son, that kind of love, that kind of sacrifice, it reminded us all why we have these traditions. Why we protect women and children above all else. She earned your freedom, Romano. Both of yours. He tipped his hat and left as quickly as he'd arrived. Emily and Vincent stood in the driveway long after the tail lights disappeared, the document still clutched in his hand. It's really over, Emily whispered. It's really over. Vincent pulled her close. New life, new beginning. Just us and Gabriel. He smiled. And maybe someday a little brother or sister for him. Emily's hand went to her stomach where their secret was still too new to be visible. Maybe sooner than you think. Vincent's eyes widened. Are you 3 weeks along? I wanted to tell you after the wedding. She bit her lip nervously. Is that okay? His answer was to sweep her into his arms and spin her around, laughing with pure joy. When he set her down, both of them were crying happy tears. More than okay, Emily. You've given me everything. A reason to live, a reason to love, a future worth having. You gave me that, too. She kissed him softly. You and Gabriel, you saved me when I thought I couldn't be saved. They stood in the Montana darkness, the stars brilliant overhead, with their past behind them and their future stretching ahead bright and full of possibility. Inside, Gabriel let out a small cry. They broke apart with matching smiles. Parents now, partners, lovers, friends. He's hungry, Emily said. Then let's go feed our son. Vincent took her hand together, the way it should be. As they walked inside, Emily looked back once at the driveway where the dawn had delivered their freedom, at the dark trees beyond that hid nothing more dangerous than wildlife, at the stars that witnessed their happy ending. She'd walked into a storm 6 months ago on that airplane. She'd found the most dangerous man in America and fed his child. And somehow, impossibly, miraculously, she'd found her home. Not in a place, but in a person. In a man who'd given up an empire for love. In a baby who'd needed her as much as she'd needed him. In a family built not on blood or tradition, but on choice. Emily Carter had finally found where she belonged, and she was never letting go. 5 years had passed since that first desperate night on the airplane, and Emily Romano stood in her kitchen watching the Montana sunrise paint the mountains gold through the picture window. The ranch house had become more than a home. It had become their sanctuary. Gabriel, now 5 years old with his father's dark eyes and his mother's gentle spirit, sat at the breakfast table carefully spreading peanut butter on toast for his little sister. Grace Romano, 3 years old with Emily's blonde curls and Vincent's stubborn chin, babbled happily in her high chair, more interested in painting her face with oatmeal than eating it. Emily had named her after the daughter she'd lost, a way of honoring the past while embracing the future. Vincent had understood without explanation, the way he understood so many things about her now. "Mama, Grace is making a mess again," Gabriel announced with the long-suffering tone of an elder sibling. Emily smiled, wiping Grace's face with a damp cloth. "She's learning, sweetheart, just like you did when you were little." The sound of boots on the porch announced Vincent's return from his morning run with their German shepherd, Bear. He'd named the dog after a childhood nickname, and the massive animal had become Gabriel's constant companion and unofficial bodyguard. Vincent filled the doorway, sweat-dampened shirt clinging to muscles that 5 years of legitimate work had kept lean and dangerous. "Morning, beautiful." He kissed Emily's temple as he reached around her for his coffee mug. "How did our little artist sleep?" Grace squealed with delight when she saw her father, reaching sticky fingers toward him. Vincent didn't hesitate to scoop her up despite his sweaty state, settling her on his hip with practiced ease. "She had that dream again," Emily said quietly, glancing at Gabriel. "The one where the shadows come for her." Gabriel's head snapped up from his toast. "I told her the shadows can't come here, Mama. Papa said so." Vincent's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only sign that he'd heard the concern in Emily's voice. "That's right, buddy. No shadows allowed on Romano land." His voice carried absolute conviction, the kind that made grown men step aside and children sleep peacefully. Romano Security Solutions had grown from Vincent's need for legitimate income into a thriving business. His understanding of threats, honed by years in a darker world, made him invaluable to wealthy clients seeking protection. He hired former military, ex-cops, people who understood that sometimes the best way to avoid violence was to be prepared for it. Emily had watched him build something clean and honorable from the ashes of his old life. But late at night, when the children were asleep, she sometimes caught him standing at the windows, checking locks that were already secure, his hand drifting to places where weapons used to rest. The past had taught them both to be watchful. Gabriel finished his breakfast and scrambled down from his chair. "Can I go see the horses, Papa?" Vincent glanced at Emily, who nodded. "Take Bear with you, and don't go past the fence line." The boy raced outside with the dog at his heels, and Emily felt that familiar tug of maternal worry mixed with pride. Gabriel was fearless in the way children should be, untouched by the darkness that had shaped his father's early life. "You're thinking too loud," Vincent murmured, setting Grace down to toddle after scattered toys. Emily leaned into his solid warmth, inhaling the familiar scent of him, soap and leather and something indefinably safe. "Just thinking about how different everything is. 5 years ago, I couldn't imagine a future at all. Now I can't imagine one without this, without you, without them." Vincent turned her in his arms, his thumb tracing the line of her cheek. "You gave me everything, Emily. A reason to be better, a family to protect, a life worth living. I wake up every morning grateful you were brave enough to feed my son on that plane." Before Emily could respond, her phone rang from the counter. She frowned at the unknown number, but answered anyway. "Hello, Emily Romano." The voice was unfamiliar, male, with an accent she couldn't place. "I think it's time we met." The line went dead. Vincent's expression had shifted the moment he heard the formal way the stranger had spoken her name. "Who was it?" "I don't know. They knew my married name, asked to meet me." Emily set the phone down with hands that had begun to tremble. Vincent was already moving, pulling his own phone from his pocket as he guided her away from the windows. Carlo, I need eyes on the perimeter now. Yes, now. And get me everything on calls to my wife's number in the last hour. He ended the call and turned to Emily, his face grave but calm. Pack a bag for you and Grace. Essentials only. Vincent, you're scaring me. What's happening? I don't know yet. But we're not taking chances. Emily saw the man she'd fallen in love with, but underneath was the shadow of the Don he'd once been, calculating and deadly. Go pack. I'll get Gabriel. Within an hour, the Romano family was in Vincent's armored SUV, heading toward a safe house he maintained 3 counties away. Gabriel and Grace dozed in their car seats, exhausted by the sudden upheaval but trusting their parents completely. Emily watched Vincent drive with one hand on the wheel and one eye on the rearview mirror, every muscle coiled for action. Tell me this isn't about your old life, she said quietly. I don't think it is. The families respect our retirement. This feels different. Hungrier. Vincent's phone buzzed with a text. Carlo had found something. Boss, the call came from a number registered to Alessandro Torino. He's clean on paper, but my contacts say he's muscle for the Kozlov organization. Russians. Emily's blood chilled. Russians. Vincent had mentioned them before, in the context of people you didn't cross and live to tell about it. What do they want with us? That's what we're going to find out. But not until you and the children are somewhere safe. Vincent's voice carried the absolute authority of a man who'd spent years making life-and-death decisions. The safe house was a modest cabin on 50 acres of remote forest land, stocked with enough supplies to last weeks. Emily settled the children for naps while Vincent made calls, his voice low and urgent. When he found her on the cabin's small porch an hour later, his expression was grim. The Kozlov family has been expanding west, muscling in on territory that used to be controlled by smaller families. They've been asking questions about me, about you, about our location. Why? We're nobody now. Just a family trying to live quietly. Vincent sat beside her on the porch swing, taking her hands in his larger ones. Because you're not nobody, Emily. You never were. In the old families, what you did for Gabriel, the bond you created, it made you sacred, untouchable. And that kind of protection, that kind of status, it has value to people who understand the old ways. Emily felt the familiar chill of fear, but also something else. Anger. They want to use me. Use what I did out of love and grief to give them legitimacy. That's exactly what they want. A wet nurse to a Don's heir, especially one who's been publicly acknowledged by the Council of Families. She's like a living treaty. Marry her into another family, and suddenly that family has ties to every major organization on the East Coast. Over my dead body. The words came out flat and cold, surprising them both. Emily stood up, pacing the small porch like a caged animal. I won't be used. I won't let our children be pawns in some power game. We left that world behind. Vincent's smile was sharp and proud. There's my fierce wife. And you're right. We did leave that world behind. But that doesn't mean I've forgotten how to fight. Over the next 3 days, Vincent worked his network of contacts while Emily cared for the children in their temporary home. Gabriel sensed the tension but adapted with the resilience of childhood, turning their confinement into an adventure. Grace clung more closely to Emily, her 3-year-old instincts telling her something was wrong even if she couldn't understand what. On the 3rd evening, Carlo arrived with intelligence that made Vincent's face go dark with anger. The Kozlovs aren't just asking questions. They've been watching the ranch, taking photos, mapping our routines. And Emily, they know about Grace. They know she's your biological daughter. Emily's hand flew to her throat. What does that mean? It means they see her as even more valuable. Not just the woman who nursed a Don's heir, but a woman who bore children to the former Don himself. In their minds, that makes Grace royalty. Vincent's voice was deadly quiet. They think they can leverage our children to force a marriage alliance. That night, Emily lay awake listening to Vincent make plans with Carlo in hushed voices. She knew he was arranging something dangerous, something that would put him at risk to protect them. She'd seen him do it before, seen the way he could become someone else when his family was threatened. When she finally crept from bed and found him sitting alone on the porch, cleaning a gun she didn't know he still owned, her heart broke a little. You swore to me you were done with violence. Her voice was barely a whisper. Vincent looked up, his eyes shadowed in the moonlight. I am done. But Emily, if they come for you, If they come for our children, I'll do whatever it takes to protect you. That's not the old Vincent talking. That's just a father and a husband who won't let anyone hurt his family. There has to be another way. We could run, disappear completely, and spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders, raising our children to be afraid of shadows. Is that the life you want for Gabriel and Grace? Emily sat beside him, taking the weapon from his hands and setting it aside. So what do you propose? We end this. Permanently. But not the way I would have 5 years ago. We do it smart, clean, in a way that sends a message but doesn't drag us back into that world. The plan Vincent outlined was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than hide or run, they would face Alessandro Torino directly, but on their terms. Vincent had arranged a meeting at a neutral location, a restaurant in Billings owned by a mutual contact. Emily would be there, protected but visible, to make it clear that she was not available for negotiation. I don't like using you as bait, Vincent said for the 10th time as they prepared to leave the safe house. Emily adjusted the concealed recording device under her blouse and checked the small pistol Vincent had insisted she carry. I'm not bait. I'm a partner. And it's time I stopped letting other people make decisions about my life. Emily had surprised herself with how easily she'd adapted to Vincent's world of calculated risks and strategic thinking. 5 years of marriage to a former Don had taught her things she'd never expected to learn. The restaurant was exactly what Emily had expected, dimly lit with private booths and the kind of atmosphere that discouraged casual conversation. Alessandro Torino was waiting for them, a man in his 40s with expensive clothes and dead eyes. 2 bodyguards flanked him, both trying to look casual and failing. Mrs. Romano. Torino stood when they approached, his smile never reaching his eyes. You're even more beautiful than the photographs. And this must be the legendary Vincent Romano, the Don who gave up an empire for love. Vincent's response was a slight nod as he seated Emily with his back to the wall and clear sight lines to all exits. What do you want, Torino? Straight to business. I like that. Torino settled back in his chair, completely at ease despite the danger radiating from Vincent like heat from a furnace. My employers have a proposition for Mrs. Romano. Your employers can go to hell, Emily said pleasantly, her voice carrying just enough steel to make Torino's bodyguards shift nervously. I'm not interested in whatever scheme you're selling. Torino's smile faltered. You haven't heard the offer yet. A marriage to my cousin Dmitri would bring you into one of the most powerful families in the Russian organization. Your children would want for nothing, and you would be protected for life. My children are already protected, Emily replied. And I'm already married to the only man I'll ever love. So whatever this is, the answer is no. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Torino leaned forward, his facade of politeness dropping. You see, Mrs. Romano, your husband may have retired, but his enemies haven't. There are still people who remember old debts, old grudges. The Romano name carries weight, and not all of it good. Marry into my family, and that protection extends to your children. Refuse, and well, accidents happen even in peaceful Montana. Vincent had gone very still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. Emily put a hand on his arm, feeling the coiled tension there. Are you threatening my family, Mr. Torino? Her voice was calm, conversational. I'm offering you a choice. Protection or vulnerability. Legitimacy or isolation. Torino's confidence was returning, clearly believing he held all the cards. Emily smiled, the expression as cold as her voice. Then let me give you a choice in return. You can walk away from this restaurant, get on a plane, and never contact my family again. Or you can continue to threaten my children and discover exactly what the former Mafia Don Vincent Romano is capable of when someone hurts what he loves. The threat hanging in the air was palpable. Torino's bodyguards had noticed other patrons in the restaurant, customers who weren't really customers, Vincent's people positioned throughout the room. The Russian was outnumbered and outmaneuvered, but he wasn't backing down. You think your reputation still carries weight, Romano. You're a rancher now, playing house with a nurse and 2 children. My organization has reach you can't imagine. Vincent finally spoke, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had once commanded respect from New York to Chicago. Your organization exists because men like me allow it to exist. You want to test that theory, be my guest. But understand this. Emily is under the protection of every major family in America. Harm her, and you won't be dealing with just me. You'll be dealing with a war you can't win. Torino's face had gone pale, but he pressed on. The old ways are dying, Romano. New blood, new rules. Emily stood up, Vincent rising smoothly beside her. Then let me explain the new rules to you, Mr. Torino. I am Emily Romano. I am the wife of Vincent Romano, mother to his children, and under the protection of powers you can't begin to understand. If anything happens to my family, if so much as a hair on my children's heads is harmed, I will personally ensure that you and everyone you care about disappears. Not because I'm connected to the old families, but because I'm a mother protecting her children. And there is nothing more dangerous in this world than that. The silence that followed was deafening. Torino stared at Emily as if seeing her for the first time, recognizing something in her eyes that hadn't been there when she'd walked in. The quiet nurse had become someone harder, someone who'd learned from the best how to make threats that carried weight. We're leaving now, Vincent said calmly, pulling out his wallet and dropping cash on the table. Mr. Torino, I suggest you do the same. The next time you contact my wife will be the last mistake you ever make. As they walked toward the exit, Emily heard Torino call after them. This isn't over, Romano. There are bigger players than me, people with longer reach. Vincent paused at the door, looking back with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. Then send them my regards. Tell them Vincent and Emily Romano are exactly where they want to be, and anyone who threatens that peace does so at their own peril. The drive back to the safe house was quiet, both of them processing what had just happened. Emily felt a strange mix of exhilaration and fear, proud of how she'd handled herself, but terrified of what it might mean for their future. You did good in there, Vincent said finally. Really good. But Emily, what you said about making people disappear, about being dangerous, you meant it. It wasn't a question. Emily considered her answer carefully. 5 years ago, I was broken, barely hanging on to life after losing Grace. You saved me, gave me a reason to live, a family to protect. I'm not that broken woman anymore, Vincent. I'm a mother, a wife, and if someone threatens my children, yes, I'll do whatever it takes to protect them, even if it means becoming someone I never thought I could be. Vincent reached over and took her hand. I love you, Emily Romano. All of you. The nurse who saved my son, the woman who chose to stay in a dangerous world for love, and the mother who just faced down a Russian enforcer to protect our family. When they returned to the safe house, Carlo was waiting with news. Torino had left Montana within hours of their meeting, his people pulling back from surveillance of their ranch. But there was something else, something that made Vincent's expression darken. Boss, we intercepted communications between Torino and his people. They're not giving up. They're escalating. Word is they're bringing in someone from New York, someone with a personal grudge against the Romano family. Emily felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Who? Matteo Benedetti, Salvatore's nephew. The kid was 15 when you took down his uncle, boss. Now he's 25, hungry for revenge, and he's convinced the Kozlovs to let him handle the Romano problem personally. Emily sank into a chair, the weight of the past crashing over her. Salvatore Benedetti, the man who'd kidnapped her and Gabriel 5 years ago, whose defeat had led to Vincent's retirement. Now his nephew wanted revenge, and he was using her family to get it. So what do we do? Emily asked, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. We end this the way we should have 5 years ago, Vincent said grimly. Permanently. But this time, we do it together. The next morning brought a phone call that changed everything. Emily answered to hear a young man's voice, filled with rage and pain that made her heart ache even as her blood chilled. Mrs. Romano, you probably don't remember me. I'm Matteo Benedetti. You and your husband destroyed my family. Now I'm going to destroy yours. Matteo, Emily said gently, surprising herself with the compassion in her voice. I do remember you. You were just a boy when your uncle made terrible choices. You don't have to follow the same path. Don't you dare try to mother me. You chose that monster over innocence, chose his world over decency. My uncle was protecting family tradition, and you helped murder him for it. Your uncle kidnapped me and a baby. He threatened to kill us both. Emily kept her voice calm, maternal instincts recognizing the hurt child beneath the angry man. Vincent gave him every chance to walk away. Your uncle chose violence. Lies. All lies to justify what you did. But it doesn't matter now. Tonight, your children will understand what it feels like to lose family. Tonight, You'll watch them die the way I watched my uncle die. The line went dead, leaving Emily staring at the phone in horror. Vincent was beside her instantly, reading the terror in her face. He's coming for Gabriel and Grace. Vincent was already on his radio, calling Carlo and the team positioned around the safe house. All units, we have an imminent threat. Hostile parties targeting the children specifically. Lock down positions and prepare for engagement. But Emily was already moving, her mind crystal clear despite the fear clawing at her chest. She ran to where Gabriel and Grace were napping, gently waking them both. "Sweetheart, we're going to play a game," she told Gabriel softly. "Remember how Papa taught you about the safe room? We're going to go there now, and you're going to take care of Grace for me, okay?" Gabriel, 5 years old but wise beyond his age, nodded seriously. "Are the bad men coming, Mama?" "Maybe. But Papa and I won't let anything happen to you. I promise." Emily helped both children into the hidden room Vincent had built beneath the cabin, a reinforced space with its own air supply and communication system. She was sealing the entrance when Vincent found her. "Emily, you need to be in there with them." "No, I'm not hiding while someone threatens my children." Emily checked the pistol Vincent had taught her to use, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "We faced this together, remember?" Vincent started to argue, then stopped. He'd seen that expression before, the determination of a mother protecting her young. Instead, he handed her a radio and kissed her forehead. "Then we do this right. Carlo has thermal imaging showing 6 vehicles approaching from different directions. Professional team, probably ex-military. They're planning a coordinated assault on all sides." Emily felt something cold and hard settle in her chest, a resolve she'd never known she possessed. "Then let's give them a war they'll never forget." The attack began at sunset, the timing calculated to use the fading light as cover. Emily positioned herself at the back of the cabin, watching the tree line for movement while Vincent coordinated with his team over the radio. The first shots came from the north, muzzle flashes in the growing darkness. "Movement, east side," Emily reported calmly into her radio, her nurse's training helping her stay focused under pressure. 2 figures approaching the generator shed. "Copy that." Carlo's voice was professional, calm. "Vincent, they're trying to cut our power." "Not happening," Vincent replied grimly. Emily heard the distinctive sound of his sniper rifle, followed by a cry of pain from the darkness. One down. The battle that followed was unlike anything Emily could have imagined 5 years earlier. She found herself moving through the cabin with deadly precision, covering angles while Vincent and his team eliminated threats. When a man burst through the back door, Emily didn't hesitate, putting 3 rounds center mass with the same steady hands that had once cradled newborn babies. Vincent appeared at her side moments later, his face grim but proud. "You okay?" "Yes." Emily checked her weapon automatically, muscle memory from countless hours of training Vincent had insisted upon. "How many left?" Carlo's voice crackled over the radio before Vincent could answer. "Boss, we've got a problem. Matteo Benedetti just rolled up in an armored car. He's got heavy weapons, and he's positioning for a direct assault on the main cabin." Emily felt ice in her veins. "He's going to try to blow his way to the children." "Not while we're breathing," Vincent said grimly. "But Emily, this is going to get ugly. Last chance to get in that safe room with Gabriel and Grace." Emily's answer was to check her spare magazines and move to the front window. "Our children are counting on us. Let's end this." What followed was the longest 20 minutes of Emily's life. Matteo's assault was vicious and personal, designed not just to kill, but to terrorize. He used speakers to taunt them, describing in graphic detail what he planned to do to their children. But if he'd expected to break their resolve, he'd badly miscalculated. Vincent Romano had spent years as a feared Don, but Emily Romano was something new and more terrifying, a mother with nothing left to lose and everything to protect. When Matteo's men breached the front door, she met them with the same determination she'd once brought to saving lives, except now she was taking them. The end came suddenly. Matteo himself burst through the smoke and chaos, screaming revenge and firing wildly. Emily saw him target the hidden panel that concealed their children and acted on pure instinct. She stepped into his line of fire, her own weapon trained on his chest. "You want to hurt my children? You go through me first." For a moment, Matteo hesitated. Emily saw the boy he'd once been, confused and hurt and angry. For a heartbeat, she thought she might reach him. Then Vincent appeared behind him like death itself, and Matteo's hesitation cost him everything. The single shot was precise, professional, final. Salvatore Benedetti's nephew crumpled to the floor, and with him died the last echo of Vincent's old life. In the silence that followed, Emily sank to her knees, the adrenaline finally leaving her system. Vincent was beside her instantly, checking for wounds, for trauma, for any sign that the violence had broken something essential in his gentle wife. "The children," she whispered. "Safe. All safe." Vincent helped her to her feet as Carlo's voice confirmed that all threats had been eliminated. The cabin was a war zone, but their family was intact. When they released Gabriel and Grace from the safe room, both children ran straight to Emily, clinging to her with the desperate relief of the very young who'd sensed mortal danger. She held them close, inhaling their familiar scent, feeling their heartbeats against her chest. "It's over, sweetheart," she whispered to Gabriel, who was trying very hard not to cry. "It's all over now." 2 days later, they returned to their ranch to find it exactly as they'd left it, protected by Vincent's security team and untouched by the violence. Emily stood in their kitchen, making breakfast for her family, watching Gabriel teach Grace to feed the horses through the window. Everything looked normal, peaceful, but she knew something fundamental had changed. Vincent found her there an hour later, staring out at their land with an expression he couldn't read. "Regrets?" he asked quietly. Emily considered the question seriously. 3 days ago, she would have said she could never hurt another human being. Yesterday, she'd killed multiple people without hesitation to protect her children. Did she regret it? No. Emily turned to face her husband, this man who'd taught her that love sometimes wore the face of violence, that protection required strength, that being a mother meant being willing to become a warrior. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that our children had to be afraid. But I don't regret protecting them." Vincent studied her face, seeing something new there, something harder and more dangerous than the woman who'd nervously fed his son on an airplane 5 years ago. "You've changed," he said finally. "We all have." Emily moved into his arms, feeling his solid warmth, his absolute safety. "But some things don't change. I still love you. I still choose this life, this family, this home. I just understand now what it really costs to keep it safe." They stood together in their kitchen, watching their children play in the morning sunshine. Two people who'd found love in the most unlikely circumstances and built something beautiful and fierce to protect it. The past might always cast shadows, but Emily Romano was no longer afraid of the dark. The Romano family had found their peace at last, earned through fire and defended with blood, and nothing would ever take it from them again. Emily Carter had finally found where she belonged, and she was never letting go.